High in a country of iron winters, blue-shadowed pines, and doors that have not been opened in 40 years, a young woman inherits a house that seems to have been waiting for her, and what begins as a quiet errand of grief turns, one letter at a time, into the slow unearthing of something her family buried on purpose. She does not know it yet. She stands on the porch, with a ring of cold keys in her palm, and the wind off the ridge moves through the aspens the way old rumor moves through a small town, steady, patient, unwilling to be hurried. Behind her, the road she drove up is already disappearing under the first light dusting of the year. In front of her, the cabin. And beneath the cabin, sealed by a wooden trapdoor and a rusted iron latch and a warning written in her grandmother's careful hand, the root cellar. She has been told all her life not to open it. Her name is Wren Halloway. She is 29, a cartographer by training, the kind of woman who reads a landscape the way other people read a face. For the small tells, the tension lines, the places where the ground remembers something the surface does not. She has come home to Blue Larch, Montana, because her grandmother, Ines, has died, 91 years old, in her sleep, in the same iron bed she was born in. There is a will and a lawyer with a soft voice, and a manila envelope containing, among other things, a single folded page in her grandmother's hand. "Wren, my little mapmaker," the page says. "The house is yours. The barn is yours. The rifles, the flour tins, the books in the loft, yours. But do not open the root cellar until the second snow. I mean this. I have never asked you for anything. I am asking you for this. That is all. No signature. No explanation. Just the request, and beneath it faintly, as though her grandmother had lifted the pen and set it down and lifted it again. A single underlined word, please, the second snow." Wren stands on the porch and turns the phrase over in her mouth like a stone from a riverbed. In Blue Larch, the first snow comes early and light, sometimes as soon as the second week of September, and it melts by afternoon. The second snow is different. The second snow is the one that stays. The old people in town count their winters by it. The trappers wait for it. The elk move down out of the high meadows because of it. It is not a date. It is a decision the mountain makes. She does not know, yet, that her grandmother chose those words with the precision of a woman, choosing which stone to place on top of a grave. Inside, the cabin is exactly as she remembers it, and exactly not. The kettle is still on the wood stove. The braided rag rug still curls at one corner where the dog used to lie. The bookshelf under the window still holds the almanacs her grandfather kept. Spine after spine, 1946, 1947, 1948, all the way through 1974, and then, abruptly, no more. Wren has always wondered about that gap. Her grandfather, Wren Halloway, died in 1974. Her grandmother lived another 52 years without buying another almanac, as though the weather itself had lost interest in being recorded once he was gone. Wren sets her duffel by the door. She walks the house the way she was taught to walk a new landscape, slowly, without touching, letting the room tell her what it wants to say first. The kitchen smells faintly of wood smoke and bay leaf. The parlor smells of the cedar chest under the window. The narrow hallway to the back smells of nothing at all, which is its own kind of message. And at the end of that hallway, past the pantry, past the mudroom, with its cracked linoleum and its row of hooks for coats, is the door, not the cellar door itself. That is outside at the north side of the house, set into the earth beneath the kitchen window. This door is the inside door, the pantry door, which locks with a hook and eye, and which, when opened, reveals only shelves of preserves and a small rag rug on the floor. Wren lifts the rug. Beneath it, in the plank floor, is a second trapdoor, a smaller one. She has not seen this before. In all her summers here as a child, in all her adolescent Christmases, in all the long August afternoons of her 20s, when she came to sit with her grandmother and drink black tea and listen to stories about elk and railroads and men with names like Angus and Silas, never once had anyone lifted this rug. The trapdoor has a brass ring. The ring is warm to the touch, which is strange, because the pantry is cold. She does not open it. Not yet. She lets the rug fall back down. She stands in the pantry with her hand on the doorframe, and she listens to the house the way a cartographer listens to a river, and she understands, without knowing why, that her grandmother has left her two doors, not one, the outside cellar, sealed with the iron latch and the warning, "Do not open until the second snow." And this one, this inside trapdoor, beneath a rug, beneath a pantry, unmentioned in any letter, marked by nothing at all, she thinks. One of these is the door she wanted me to find. The other is the door she was hoping I never would. She does not know, yet, which is which. That first night, the snow did not come. The sky turns the color of pewter, and then the color of a bruise, and then, just before dark, the color of nothing at all, which in the high country is the color that means wait. Wren builds a fire in the wood stove the way her grandfather taught her. Small sticks first, then a knot of pine, then 2 split rounds of larch laid crosswise, so the air can climb between them. She heats a can of soup. She eats it standing at the window, watching the tree line move. She calls her mother from the landline, because there is no cell signal in Blue Larch and there never has been. Her mother, Diane, lives in Portland now and has not been back to the cabin since the funeral of Wren's grandfather in 1974, when Diane was 16 years old and left the following spring and did not return. "You're really staying up there?" her mother says. "Until the second snow, at least." There is a pause on the other end of the line. Wren has been a cartographer long enough to know that a pause is a kind of terrain, that some silences are flat, and some are cliffs, and some are the low, dangerous shelves of ice that a person can walk out onto without knowing. "Did she leave you a letter?" her mother asks. Her voice is careful. "She left me the house." "I know that. I mean a letter, a note, something." Wren looks at the folded page on the kitchen table. "Do not open the root cellar until the second snow." "No," she says. "Nothing important." She does not know why she lies, or she knows exactly why, which is the same thing. Her mother is quiet for a long time. Then she says, "Wren, if you find anything down there, anything at all, you call me before you touch it. Do you understand me? Down where? You know where." And her mother hangs up. Wren stands with the receiver in her hand and listens to the dial, tone until it becomes another sound. The sound of the wood stove ticking, the sound of the wind moving through the eaves, the sound of a house that has been keeping a secret so long it has forgotten how to speak of anything else. "Down where?" her mother said. "Not down there. Not in the cellar. Down where?" As though there were more than one down. As though her mother, too, had once lifted a rug in a pantry, and had seen a brass ring set into a plank floor, and had put the rug back and never told anyone. In the morning, the first snow comes. It comes the way the first snow always comes in Blue Larch, hesitantly, apologetically, in flakes so fine they seem to be considering whether to be snow at all. Wren stands on the porch with a mug of coffee and watches it fall onto the split-rail fence and vanish. By 9 o'clock, the ground is still bare. By 10, the sun has come through, and what little accumulated on the roof has begun to drip from the eaves in slow, bright beads. This is not the second snow. This is not even the first. Really, this is the first, the courtesy snow, the one that comes so the second one will not be a surprise. She has time. She dresses in her grandfather's old wool coat, which still hangs on the peg by the door, and she walks the property, the barn, the woodshed, the chicken coop empty for a decade, the hens long since sold to a neighbor, down the valley, the small square of fenced garden where her grandmother grew potatoes and turnips, and one obstinate row of sunflowers that never got taller than her knees. And, at the north side of the house, the outside root cellar. It is not much to look at. A slanted wooden door set into a low hummock of earth, banked with sod and old stones. An iron latch, orange with rust. A hasp for a padlock, though there is no padlock. Only a length of baling wire twisted tight in its place, the way a person locks something they trust the weather to keep closed for them. Wren crouches by the door. She does not touch the wire. She reads it the way she would read a contour line, for the story it is telling about what lies underneath. The wire is old, but it is not 40 years old. It has been replaced. Recently, within the last 2 or 3 winters, judging by the sheen of oxidation on the cut ends, her grandmother, 91 years old, at some point in the last 1,000 days of her life, walked out to this door in the dark or the snow, or the thin light of morning, and untwisted the old wire and put a new one in its place, which means her grandmother had been inside. Whatever the warning in the letter meant, it did not mean the cellar had been sealed since 1974. It meant something else. It meant, do not open it until the second snow, not because it had been closed forever, but because Wren Halloway had wanted the timing to be exact. She had wanted her granddaughter to open the door under a specific weather. She had wanted the ground frozen, and the leaves down, and the town below the ridge already turning in for the winter. She had wanted witnesses to be scarce. Wren stands up. The wind has changed. She can feel it on the side of her face, coming off the north ridge instead of the south, which in Blue Larch is the way the wind blows before real weather. She thinks the second snow is coming soon. She thinks, I am supposed to be afraid of what is behind this door. And then she thinks, and this is the thought that will not leave her, the thought that will keep her up that night, reading her grandfather's almanacs by lamplight, the thought that will send her, at last, to lift the rug in the pantry a second time. She thinks, but she wanted me to find it. Whatever it is, whatever she buried here. She could have burned it. She could have carried it out into the woods and dropped it in a lake. She had 52 years, and instead she left it for me, and she wrote me a letter, and she signed it, please. She wanted me to know. She just did not want me to know too soon. The almanacs are where the answers begin, though Wren does not understand that yet. She lifts them down from the shelf that night, one by one, and she opens them at the kitchen table under the yellow light of the kerosene lamp. Her grandmother preferred to electric bulbs. 1946, 1947, 1948. The pages are soft with age. Her grandfather's handwriting fills the margins. Small, careful, engineer neat. Rainfall totals. Snowmelt dates. The day the first calf dropped. The day the creek froze. The day a bear came down out of the aspens and killed the Petersons' dog. She turns the pages slowly. She is looking for something, though she could not have said what. She is a cartographer. She trusts the margins. And then, in the 1953 almanac, tucked between the pages for November and December, she finds it. A photograph. Black and white, 3 inches by 4, its corners softened by decades of being touched. 4 men, standing in front of the barn. Her grandfather is on the left, 28 years old, unsmiling, one hand on the shoulder of the man next to him. The other 3 men Wren does not recognize. They are all wearing wool coats. One of them, the second from the right, is wearing a coat that does not quite fit. The sleeves are too short, the shoulders too narrow. His face is turned slightly away from the camera, as though he has not agreed to be photographed, and is only being polite. On the back of the photograph, in her grandfather's handwriting, are 4 names: Owen, Silas, Angus. K just the letter, K nothing else. Wren stares at the photograph for a long time. She turns it over, she turns it back. She looks at the man whose coat does not fit, and she looks at his face, what she can see of it, and she thinks about the stories her grandmother used to tell, on August afternoons, over black tea. Stories about elk and railroads and men named Angus and Silas. Never, in all those stories, a man named K. She sets the photograph on the table. She turns the almanac's pages backward, slowly, looking for anything else. And there, in the entry for October 14, 1953, a date 13 years after the war her grandfather never talked about had ended, she finds a single line, written in the same small, careful hand as the marginalia. K arrived. Cellar prepared. God forgive us. That is all. The next entry is about a broken axle on the hay wagon. The entry after that is about the weather. But the line is there. It has been there for 73 years, sitting on a shelf in a cabin in Blue Larch, Montana, waiting for someone to open the almanac at the right page. Wren closes the book. She does not open the trapdoor in the pantry that night. She sits by the wood stove until the fire burns down to coals, and she watches the snow. The first snow, the courtesy snow, begin at last to fall in earnest. By morning, there will be 2 inches on the ground. By evening, it will be gone. The second snow is still coming. Blue Larch is not a town that answers questions. Wren drives down the ridge road the next morning. The truck is her grandfather's, a 1969 Ford that starts on the 3rd try and idles like a patient animal. And she parks outside the general store, and she goes in for flour and coffee and a spool of the kind of copper wire her grandmother used to mend the chicken coop. The woman behind the counter is Marta Vance. Marta is 78. Marta has known Wren since Wren was 4 years old and used to sit on the counter and eat penny candy while her grandmother argued about the price of lamp oil. "You staying up at the house?" Marta asks. Until the snow settles in. Marta nods. She rings up the flour. She rings up the coffee. She holds the spool of copper wire in her hand for a moment longer than she needs to, and then she sets it on the counter and she says, without looking at Wren, "Your grandmother was a good woman. She carried what she had to carry." Wren goes still. In cartography, there is a concept called the tell of the ground, the small, involuntary detail that reveals what the map is trying to hide, a ridge that runs the wrong direction, a creek that ends where no creek should end. The face of a woman who has known your family for 50 years, saying she carried what she had to carry, as though that were a normal thing to say about the dead. Marta, Wren says, quietly. "Who was Kay?" Marta's hand stops on the register. For a long moment, the store is very quiet. Somewhere in the back, a refrigerator hums. Outside, on the porch, the wind moves the loose board that has needed nailing down since 1998. "You have been in the almanacs," Marta says. "It is not a question." "Yes." Marta closes the register. She looks up. Her eyes are gray and clear and old, the color of the sky over Blue Larch on a morning when the weather is deciding. "Child," she says, "there are things in this town that were agreed on, not by law, not by any papers, by the people who were here. Your grandfather was one of them, and your grandmother was one of them, And my father was one of them, and I have kept my mouth shut about it since I was 15 years old, and I mean to keep it shut a while longer. Marta, I will tell you this much, Marta says, and no more. Ines was waiting for you. She knew she was dying. She could have opened that cellar herself. She could have burned what was in it. She chose not to. She chose you. So if you are going to open it, child, and I know you are, you open it slowly, and you read every scrap of paper down there before you speak a word to anyone. Not your mother, not the sheriff, not a soul. You read it all first. Do you hear me? I hear you. The second snows, Marta says. Not before. Your grandmother was right about that. Why? Marta looks at her for a long, long moment. Because the road washes out with the first thaw, she says, finally. And the second snow means the thaw has passed. It means no one is coming up that ridge until spring. It means you will be alone with it. That is what she wanted for you, to be alone with it. She turns away then, and she busies herself with the shelves behind the counter, and Wren understands that the conversation is over. She pays. She takes her flour and her coffee and her copper wire, and she walks out into the pale sunlight of a November morning in Blue Larch, Montana, and she stands beside the truck for a long time before she opens the door. Alone with it, Marta said. Whatever it is, her grandmother had wanted her to meet it without witnesses. The second snow comes on the fifth night. Wren knows it the moment she wakes up. She has been sleeping in the loft, under 3 quilts, and the light through the small window is different. Not the thin blue of moonlight on bare ground, but the flat, absorbent white of a world that has been muffled. She lies still for a long time. She listens. There is no wind. There is no bird call. There is only the sound of a house sitting inside a silence so complete it seems to have weight. She dresses. Wool socks. Her grandfather's coat, a knit cap of her grandmother's, dark green, mended at the crown with black thread. She goes down the ladder slowly. She stokes the wood stove. She makes coffee. She stands at the kitchen window and watches the light come up over the ridge, and she sees that the snow is not falling anymore, that it has already fallen, that it lies 8 inches deep on the split rail fence, and on the roof of the barn, and on the slanted wooden door of the root cellar at the north side of the house, so that the door itself is only a shape now, a soft dark rectangle beneath the white. The second snow. She drinks her coffee. She does not hurry. Her grandmother did not hurry, ever, in anything that mattered, and Wren has begun to understand that this is not merely her grandmother's request, but her grandmother's method, that the pacing itself is part of the instruction, that a person who reads a letter too fast will miss what the letter is really saying. She puts on her boots. She takes the ring of keys from the hook by the door. She takes the kerosene lamp, and a box of matches, and a small folding knife that has been in her grandfather's coat pocket for as long as she can remember. She does not take her phone. There is no signal anyway, but she does not take it. And she registers the choice as she makes it. And she understands that she is doing what her grandmother did. She is going down alone. She walks around the north side of the house. The snow squeaks under her boots. The air smells of wood smoke and cold iron. She kneels by the cellar door. She untwists the copper wire, new wire, wire her grandmother replaced within the last 2 years, wire meant to signal that the door had been recently, deliberately resealed. She lifts the iron latch. It moves more easily than she expected. It has been oiled. The door swings up on its hinges. Cold air rises out of the cellar, and behind the cold air, the smell of earth and old wood and something else, something faintly sweet, faintly chemical, like paper that has been kept in the dark for a very long time. Wren lights the lamp. She goes down. The stairs are wooden, 7 of them, worn smooth in the middle by decades of boots. The cellar itself is small, perhaps 10 feet by 12, and its walls are made of round river stone, mortared with lime. The ceiling is low. The floor is packed with earth. Against the far wall, exactly where a root cellar should have its shelves, there are shelves, jars of preserves, some of them dated in her grandmother's handwriting, 1978, 1982, 1991. Some of them so old the labels have gone brown. But the cellar is not what she came down for. Against the near wall, to the right of the stairs, there is a wooden bench. And beneath the bench, on the packed earth floor, there is a rectangular wooden box, about the size of a small footlocker, banded with 2 iron straps, unlocked, its lid slightly ajar as though the last person to close it had not quite believed the closing would take. Wren sets the lamp on the bench. She kneels. She lifts the lid inside her papers, not gold, not weapons, not bones, papers. A great many of them. Bundles of letters tied with brown string. Small leather-bound notebooks. A stack of yellowed carbon copies. A folded document with a red and black stamp she recognizes. From her cartography training, as the letterhead of a bureau of the United States War Department discontinued in 1947. and on top of the papers wrapped in a square of oiled cloth, an object she does not identify at first. A small booklet. She unwraps it, a passport German, issued 1938. The photograph inside is of a young man, perhaps 25, with pale eyes and a serious mouth. The name printed beneath the photograph is Konrad Weiss, Konrad. Wren sits back on her heels. She looks at the passport. She looks at the papers. She looks at the shelves of preserves, and the packed earth floor, and the round river stones of the wall her great-grandfather is said to have built with his own hands in 1919. Arrived. Cellar prepared. God forgive us. She thinks she understands, now, at least the shape of it. She does not yet understand the weight. She sits down on the earth floor of the cellar, and she pulls the box toward her, and she begins to read. What she learns, over the next 4 days, in the cellar and by the wood stove and in the loft under 3 quilts, by the light of the kerosene lamp, is this. In the autumn of 1953, a man named Konrad Weiss came to Blue Larch, Montana. He was 39 years old. He was, in 1945, a junior engineer at a manufacturing plant in the town of Peenemünde on the Baltic coast, where the German military had built the rocket program that produced, among other things, the V-2. He was not a scientist. He was not a party member. He was, by his own account, in a letter dated April 1946 and never sent, a man who tightened bolts on machines he did not fully understand, in a country he no longer recognized, for wages he was afraid to refuse. He was not, at the end of the war, taken to the United States under Operation Paperclip. He was not important enough. He was, instead, held for 18 months in a British internment camp, released in the summer of 1947, and left to find his way, as tens of thousands did, through the shattered geography of post-war Europe. He should not have come to Montana. There was no reason for him to have come to Montana. The reason is in the letters. The letters, and Wren reads them slowly, one at a time, in the order in which they were tied, are between Konrad Weiss and a woman named Ilse. Ilse was his wife. She had died in the firebombing of Hamburg in July 1943, along with their infant daughter, Anneliese, 6 months old. He had been at Peenemünde. He had not been able to get to them. He had not been able to bury them. He had not, according to a letter he wrote to no one in particular, in the winter of 1948, been able to remember, afterward, the sound of his daughter's voice, though she had never spoken a word. He came to Blue Larch, Montana, because in the summer of 1952, in a boarding house in Buenos Aires, he met a man who told him about a valley in the American West, where a rancher named Wren Halloway was, quietly, without fanfare, without permission from any government, providing shelter to men like him, not war criminals, not the ones the newspapers wanted, the other ones, the small ones, the bolt tighteners, the ones who had done nothing worth hanging for and everything worth grieving. Wren Halloway had been an American infantryman in the Ardennes in the winter of 1944. He had come home in the summer of 1945 with a piece of shrapnel in his hip and a photograph in his breast pocket that he did not show his wife for 11 years. The photograph, Wren finds it at last in a small envelope at the very bottom of the box, is of a boy, a German boy, perhaps 16 years old, in the uniform of a Volkssturm conscript, dead in the snow. Wren Halloway had shot him, on a bridge, in the last week of the war. Because the boy had been holding a rifle, and because Owen had been holding a rifle, and because that was what the war had been for. He had brought the photograph home because he could not leave it. He had kept it in a drawer in the cabin in Blue Larch because he could not bring himself to burn it. And he had, in the years that followed, quietly, without fanfare, without permission from any government, become the man who made it possible for other small men, for bolt tighteners, for boys who had held rifles, for men who had lost their wives and their daughters, and their memories of their daughters' voices, to disappear into a valley in the American West. Konrad Weiss lived in the root cellar for the first 3 months of the winter of 1953. Then he lived in the loft above the barn until 1957. Then he lived, under an assumed name, in a small cabin on the far side of the ridge, until his death in 1981. He is buried in the Halloway family plot, under a stone that says, simply, Wren has walked past that stone every summer of her life. She thought it was a dog's grave. There are other letters, too, other names, other men, 9 of them, in total, over the course of 22 years. Not all of them are Germans. 2 were Hungarians. One was a Ukrainian who had spent the war as a translator for the wrong army and did not dare go home. One was an Italian anti-fascist who had ended up on the wrong list. All of them were small. All of them were the ones the newspapers had not wanted. All of them had come to Blue Larch, and had been fed, and had been sheltered, and had been given, in exchange for their labor and their silence, a name that was not their name, and a place to sit on a porch in the evening and watch the light come down off the ridge. None of it was legal. Very little of it was known, even in town. Marta Vance's father knew. The old doctor, dead since 1979, knew. The Petersons knew. That was all. And Ines. Ines knew everything. Ines had been the one who cooked for them, who mended their coats, who taught 2 of them to speak English well enough to pass for Canadian at the general store, who buried 3 of them in the family plot and wrote nothing on the stones but a single letter in a year. Ines had carried it for 52 years after Owen died. Ines had waited, for reasons the letters do not fully explain, until she was 91 years old and dying in the iron bed she was born in. And then she had written to her granddaughter, and she had said, "Do not open the root cellar until the second snow, because by the second snow, the road would be washed out. Because by the second snow, no one would be coming up the ridge. Because by the second snow, Wren would be alone with it, and would have to decide, alone, what to do, burn the papers, or keep them, or send them, at last, to the archive of some university, where a historian with soft hands and good intentions would turn them into a book, and the small men of Blue Larch would become footnotes in a chapter about a moral gray zone in post-war America, or bury them again, deeper, and write another letter to a granddaughter not yet born, and say, "Do not open until the second snow." Ines had not wanted to make the decision. Ines had wanted her granddaughter to make it. That was the inheritance. That was what the house was. Not the walls, not the barn, not the shelves of preserves, preserves. The choice. On the 6th night, Wren does not sleep. She sits at the kitchen table with the kerosene lamp turned low, and she lays the papers out in front of her, and she reads them again, and she thinks about her grandmother, and she thinks about her grandfather, and she thinks about a boy on a bridge in the Ardennes in the last week of the war, and she thinks about a woman named Ilse and an infant named Anneliese, who died in Hamburg in July 1943, and she thinks about the second trapdoor, the one under the rug in the pantry, the one she has not yet opened, because there is a second trapdoor, and she has not forgotten it. She lifts the lamp. She walks down the narrow hallway. She stands in the pantry. She lifts the rug. The brass ring is still warm. She kneels. She takes hold of the ring. She pulls. The trapdoor comes up more easily than the outside one did. Beneath it is a shallow space, not a cellar, only a compartment, perhaps 2 feet deep, perhaps 3 feet wide. Inside the compartment is a single object. A small tin box, painted green, once, though the paint has mostly flaked away. Wren lifts it out. She sets it on the pantry floor. She opens it. Inside the tin box is a photograph, a color photograph, faded but color. A woman, perhaps 30 years old, holding a baby. The woman has pale eyes and a serious mouth. She is standing in front of a house Wren does not recognize, in a country Wren has never been to. On the back of the photograph, in a hand Wren does not know, is written, "For Konrad, from your Anneliese. She lived, 1974. Wren sits down on the pantry floor. She reads the words again. She reads them a 3rd time. She reads them a 4th. She lived the infant daughter, 6 months old, in Hamburg in July 1943. The one whose voice Konrad Weiss could not remember because she had never spoken a word. She had not died in the firebombing. She had been carried out of it, somehow, by a neighbor, by a stranger, by the accident of physics that spared some and did not spare others. And she had grown up, somewhere in Germany, under a name Konrad had not known, and in 1974 she had been 31 years old, and she had been standing in front of a house Wren did not recognize, holding a baby of her own, and she had sent a photograph across the ocean to a man in a small cabin on the far side of a ridge in Blue Larch, Montana, who had believed, for 31 years, that his entire family was ash. There is a second sheet of paper in the tin box. It is a letter, in the same unknown hand, dated 1974. It is short. It says that the writer, Anneliese, had been found at last through the work of a Red Cross tracing office. It says that she had learned only recently that her father was still alive. It says that she wanted to come. She wanted, more than anything, to come. There is a 3rd sheet of paper. It is in her grandmother's hand. It is undated. It says, "He asked me not to answer her. He was afraid of what he would have to tell her. He was afraid she would not want him if she knew. I promised him I would not answer. I have kept that promise for 52 years. Wren, my little map maker, I am giving you the letter. I am giving you the address. I am giving you the choice I would not make. Forgive me, please." Wren sits on the pantry floor with the photograph in one hand and the letter in the other, and outside, on the north ridge, the second snow lies 8 inches deep and unbroken to the tree line, and inside, in a house that has been waiting for her, the kerosene lamp burns low, and she understands, at last, why her grandmother chose the second snow. Not because the road would be washed out, not because no one would be coming, but because by the second snow, the world would be still enough, and small enough, and quiet enough, that a woman alone at a kitchen table might hear, if she listened carefully, the sound of a decision being made. Her grandmother had not left her a warning. Her grandmother had left her a door. 2 doors, in fact, one for the men who had come to Blue Larch and been given, at some cost, a place to rest, and one for the daughter, still living, who had been waiting 52 years to be told her father had loved her, and had thought of her every day, and had been unable to say so. Wren looks at the address on the letter. She looks at the year, 1974. She thinks she may still be alive. She would be 83. She folds the letter. She puts the photograph back in the tin box. She closes the box. She stands up. She walks to the kitchen, and she sits down at the table, and she takes a clean sheet of paper from the drawer where her grandmother kept her stationery, and she uncaps a pen. Outside, the second snow does not fall. It has already fallen. It lies on the ridge and the roof and the slanted wooden door of the root cellar, and it will lie there until spring. Wren begins to write. Dear Anna Lizzie, she writes, my grandmother has died. I have found your letter. I have found your photograph. I am so sorry it took so long. I am writing to tell you that your father lived here, in this house, in this valley, until 1981. He loved you every day. He was afraid to say so. He did not know that you had lived. My grandmother knew, and she did not tell him, because he asked her not to. She carried this for 52 years, and now she has given it to me, and I am giving it, at last, to you. She writes for a long time. She writes about the ridge, and the aspens, and the almanacs on the shelf. She writes about the stone in the family plot that says only K. She writes about the way the light comes down off the ridge in the evening, and the way the wind moves through the eaves, and the way a house can keep a secret so long it forgets how to speak of anything else. She writes, I did not know any of this. I am learning it as I write to you. If you would like to come, the road will be clear again in May. She signs the letter. She folds it. She addresses the envelope. She sets it on the table beside the kerosene lamp, and she watches the flame move inside its glass chimney, and she thinks about her grandmother, and she thinks about her grandfather, and she thinks about a boy on a bridge in the Ardennes in the last week of the war. She thinks, this is the map she left me, not of the land. Of the choice, she thinks. She trusted me with it. Outside, in the country of iron winters and blue-shadowed pines and doors that have not been opened in 40 years, the second snow lies unbroken on the north ridge. Inside, in a small kitchen, in a small cabin, in a small town, in a valley the newspapers have never heard of, a young woman sits at a table with a letter in her hand, and she understands at last what a warning is. A warning is not a wall. A warning is an instruction about when to open the door. She sets the letter beside the lamp. She turns the wick down. She goes up the ladder to the loft, and she lies in the iron bed her grandmother was born in, and she listens to the silence of a house that has, for the first time in 73 years, finished saying what it had to say. In the morning, she will drive the letter down the ridge to Marta Vance's store, and she will mail it, and she will wait for the answer that may or may not come. But that is the morning. Tonight, she sleeps. And in the root cellar, beneath the north side of the house, beneath 8 inches of the second snow, the wooden box sits open on the packed earth floor, and the papers rest quietly inside it, and the small men of Blue Larch, the bolt tighteners, the boys who had held rifles, the ones the newspapers had not wanted, rest, at last, in the keeping of someone who has decided, alone, and at the right hour, what their story is going to be. That is the inheritance. That is what the house was. That is why her grandmother wrote, in her careful hand, on a folded page in a manila envelope in a lawyer's office, in a town Wren no longer lived in, do not open the root cellar until the second snow, please.